This is the moment for which every bow hunter waits. How can you experience this moment year after year? The answer is scouting, the key to trophy bucks. My name is Paul Brunner. I'm a bow hunter, in fact the shortest bow hunter in the world. This video is a scouting video. We get an awful lot of questions about good scouting techniques, and we decided to try and put something together that would give you an idea how to scout properly. And primarily this is for white-tailed deer, since that seems to be the most popular animal to hunt with a bow. What I tell people when I talk about scouting is that I consider hunting for whitetails a stew. If you're going to have a stew, you've got to have the proper ingredients, and they've got to go together correctly in order to have a stew that tastes good. To me, of the stew of whitetail deer hunting, scouting is the most critical part. It's the key ingredient. Without it, you don't have a good tasting stew. In order to scout properly, you've got to do it year round, and you've got to use your head, you've got to think, you've got to understand. And what we'd like to do in this film is take you through scouting all year long and teach you some of the real fancy little tricks that will turn you into a first-class whitetail hunter. Let's take a look at some good footage, and we'll go along and see if we can teach you some good scouting techniques. For this next little tip, since we all want to hunt bucks, what we're going to do is first find a buck track, and I'm going to show you something really neat. This is a buck track. You can virtually always tell a buck track because he drags his feet in the snow. Unless you get super deep snow, but we've got about 3 inches of snow here, and this is probably an older, bigger buck. Some biologists could tell you why. I just don't know the answer, but bucks drag their feet. The older bucks drag more. Your doe tracks will be individual. Here's an old set of deer tracks. It looks like there were two, maybe a doe and a fawn. No drag marks at all. There's another buck track over there. From here I can see the drag marks. Now what we're going to do is we're going to follow the tracks backwards. Why? Real simple. If you find a fairly fresh buck track in the snow and you follow it, it may be that buck is not far ahead. You jump him, you won't be able to do with the tracks what I'm going to show you. What we're doing by following the track backward is we're going to find out what that deer did undisturbed. We're not going to jump him over there because he went that way. I'm going to guess that this track was made right at twilight, dusk, in the evening, because he came out of a bedding area and went right out across the open. I want to know what he did back in there where he beds, feeds, breeds, goes potty. I'm going to follow his track backward and just observe what he did. And I may see other buck tracks joining in, but it may give me a real good idea where to put a tree stand back in there for next year, because the hunting season's already over. This is critical scouting time for me after the season. Still a little bit of rut activity, might find scrapes that are still being used, and I'm getting that week after the hunting season behavior, which is pretty much the same as hunting season. And next year I'll have it all drawn out on a map. I'll have a little hunter's log. Bingo, put up a stand. Let's take a look. Here's interesting. Here we're getting into what I call the bedding or feed area. We've already picked up a small deer trail. I know this area. There'll be another trail coming in over there. I'm kind of guessing that even though the rut's over about a week, there's still going to be some of this year's doe fawn cycle, and there's going to be does that weren't bred that will recycle. This guy is just meandering. He's looking. He's going right into where the other deer are. We'll go a little further, see what else we find. This is what I'm talking about. This is an undisturbed deer. We're going to learn what his behavior was yesterday, if that's when the track was made, without anybody hassling him. No gunshots, no bow hunter sneaking around, just plain old deer behavior. Hey, look, see, there's been does in here feeding. There's droppings. This is a Douglas fir, and the deer like to eat the needles this time of year. He came right through here to scope it out. He's looking. This guy's looking for that doe that might still be in estrus. Lots more deer tracks now. This guy has to be cruising. Just like you guys that are going to these singles bars. Boy, he's looking. Okay, this is interesting. This guy's track has really been meandering in and out of the junipers. And here's an old bed made before the storm, which was 2 nights ago. You can probably see it. This guy's just zigzagging looking for bedded does. This is a really super incredibly neat spot to set up a stand. You've got a river right over there, a big river. 25 yards from here, the bench drops off to the river. This is a perfect natural funnel. The deer are going to have to move along the edge here. They can't go that way. The wind generally comes right here. Just dynamite. And look, you got thick fir trees here. Perfect spot to set up a tree stand, have a crosswind, and have that buck right at daylight or dusk come meandering through here looking for a bedded doe. Let's follow him just a little further and see what else we find. Yeah, here's a scrape. See, he came through here, freshened a scrape, right over there into that thick stuff where we found that old bed. Now this really reinforces what I'm getting in my head about where to put a stand. Probably there are more scrapes down. Yeah, here's a bed. Here's a bed right here. This is really classic. It's a heck of a lesson because this is completely, totally unrehearsed. You're going to have to trust me on that. We've walked on this buck's track. We're going backwards. We've got a scrape. There's a bed here. Whether it's his or not, I doubt it because it's got a little too much frost in it. But what we're doing is I'm scouting for next year. I'm going to put a stand here. I mean, this is not Hollywood. And what you've got here is you've got a classic situation. This guy's running a scrape line. He's coming in here trying to pick up does, and he's going to go right in by some fantastic tree stand setups with a crosswind, 90 degrees. You can't beat this one with a stick. We've got ambush sites, but now we know the reason for this behavior, and we know it's totally undisturbed. Scout them backwards. I go home, this goes in my hunting log, it goes on my USGS quad maps. I'll have a stand here probably in September, so that when I hang the stand at 2 months before the rut, the noise is made, the deer forget it, skinny in here, Boone and Crockett buck. I love it. What you've just seen is a really super example of a correct scouting technique. And before we go any further, what I'd like to do is plant a few thoughts in your mind. I go around the country doing seminars and speaking with other bow hunters, and I've had the chance to talk with them and hear some of their problems. And the one thing that I find in all of my travels and talks is difficulty with scouting because of this reason. Most bow hunters don't think. Absolutely, without question, this is the place we all lack. And I'm a classic example. For years, I'll go and do something just because of habit, without thinking about doing it differently, without thinking, why am I not scoring on this big deer? Why am I not finding him when I know he's there? You've got to think. Part of this will be more easily understood if you think of one of the scouting techniques I use, and I call it the 4 W's. And that is what, where, when, and this is the most critical, and it ties back into thinking. Why? This is the one thing that all of us seem to use least of all, is finding out why something is happening when we're out scouting. Why is a deer doing this? But let's go back here to what. What is important if you have the potential of 4 or 5 different areas that you can hunt whitetails? In that case, what I tell people is this. You want to go to each area, you want to scout it, and you want to find out what is there. And then obviously pick the area that has the biggest buck. If you have only one area to hunt, It isn't anywhere near as critical from the standpoint of where do I go, but it is important to know what is the biggest buck in your area. Where in the area are the deer? At what time? When? These two are very important. But it all comes back to this, no matter how you cut it, the most critical factor is why. And you have to think to understand why. If you know why a deer is in an area, why he's there at a certain time, why he's traveling a certain route, if you know the why, you will kill a big buck with a bow and arrow at close range, as long as you think and put all this stuff together and outsmart him. You have to keep something in mind. You will never, no matter what you do, equal the senses of the deer. Sight, smell, hearing ability, and that sixth sense, that electric thing inside that lets them know you're there when there's no way they can possibly know you're there. But they can't outthink you. The human mind is beyond comparison in terms of its power and ability. Most of it just don't use it. And as you watch this video, as you go out and apply some of these scouting techniques, start to think, start to wonder why. This is the best thing I could possibly pass on to you. What I'd like to do now is I'd like to show you year-round scouting, which I consider to be absolutely critical, and we're actually scouting one particular buck. And in so doing, we've used every single one of these things here. We found the big buck in the area, we found where he is, we found when he was there because we got video footage of him, and we now know why. And this buck, hopefully, will be on my wall about 2 months after the rut this coming fall. Let's take a look at some of this footage and follow along. That's a beautiful buck on the left. He's in the 140, 150 class. Hard to tell with the velvet on. Boy, that's a nice buck. He's got a lot of mass, spread. He's still got another couple of weeks of growing left to do. See, there's a classic example. This is an area that's been logged years ago, and these old logging roads are still here. Just driving along like that, and there's those two bucks. That one was definitely a real nice buck. I would say probably going to be 140 or better. A little hard to tell on the velvet, plus he was moving right out. Now I know where he is. I know that this general area has at least one real nice buck in it. I know this area from hunting. I know where scrapes will be in the fall. Instead of coming in here and hunting those scrapes and hoping there's a decent buck around, I now know there's a decent buck around. Unless I find something a lot bigger, this is one area I'll definitely think hard about hunting. So I'm trying to find what's in the area. I already know the area, or I would learn the area, and then I'll come in and hunt that buck. Darn nice buck. He's young though. You see he's real wide. He looks super impressive, but he's spindly. We got video footage of this buck last year. A couple of slides of him too. This is 2 years in a row now I've successfully scouted him. There's a real good chance now that I've gotten to know him that well that I'll have a good crack at him next fall. And by next fall he should be starting to show some pretty significant mass. He should be quite a bit wider. It's a buck that I guess because the deer has such a tall rack. It's kind of glitched down. Our annual antler roundup, where we pick up shed antlers with the families, is not only one of our most popular aspects of scouting, but actually one of the most informative. We'll show you what we mean. Okay, dudes, this is the beginning of the 1993 annual antler roundup. We're doing this so that we can include our families, so that the wives won't leave us because we scout and hunt too much. Besides, it's fun. Tell you what we're looking for. Tom and I have been scouting this one buck for 2 years, and he beds up in here, and we're going to try and find his sheds. We know he lived at least through December because we got some video footage of him after the hunting season. What we're going to do, this logging road goes up here and then it switchbacks. We're all going to spread out in a line and really look wherever you see a tree that has a little hump and lots of branches, because these deer will get up on there and bed. And lots of times they'll shed right where their beds are. And we'll go all the way up on this side, zigzagging back and forth. If anybody finds, we're looking for a really beautiful 5x6 or 6x7, and you'll know it if you see it. It's a good big wide rack. Just give a shout and we'll come over and film where you find the antlers. We get up fairly high, up to the next switchback that goes out that way. We'll just do a little loop above it because there's a bedding knob there. Then we'll come down on this side of the road and meet back here. Any questions? You got one? Oh, here's the other one. See, they've been bedding in here. This is the rack we're looking for. This is that guy that I've seen now for 2 years. He's been bedding at the base of this tree probably quite often this winter. Let me see. That's a nice rack. This is a really young deer. We passed him up 2 years ago, and I'm going to guess he's about 3.5 years old, maybe 4.5, but I don't think so. He's too light horned. This deer, probably this coming fall, is going to be really, really nice. See it? Yeah. This is the result of about 3.5, 4 hours of antler hunting. We've still got a hunt to go in the morning. Tommy's holding the match set from a buck that we scouted hard and started hunting this past fall, and we'll be really serious after him in the upcoming fall because he's going to be quite a bit bigger. We had to call him the storm buck. Tom whined a lot about not having any deer named after him.
Buck on the place.
Well, this is the handsomest one right here. That is a really neat buck. This guy, I scouted him all fall, and I really did not want to take a deer till the rut because I wanted to see what else was around. And he had a beautiful, typical 6-point on this side, and this was 9 points. And he disappeared. I think he went into the neighbors where they don't allow hunting when the rut came. We got some nice, Diane found a real dandy there.
That's the one we call the Potter buck. About probably 3 years old shed, huh?
Yeah, that shed's an old one, but boy, he was massive, real massive. And these, you know, some nice young bucks coming along, and we've still got probably half our hunting territory, you know, to scope out tomorrow, but there's some real good sheds here. And, you know, the neat thing is it really gives the whole family a chance to get on and have a good time. You guys enjoyed it, didn't you? We got one here from San Francisco, one from France. So apparently horn hunting is a big deal. Yeah, you bet.
They just came for the food.
Yeah. Speaking of which, it's about time to go cook. Okay, this is our annual game supper that we do at our antler roundups, and we do this to make sure that we can involve the entire family. It's kind of crazy and wild. We have only wild game. We're going to have tonight for appetizers. We're going to have German sausage made from deer and elk. We're going to have smoked salmon that we brought in from Alaska. Got rattlesnake that we're going to fry up. We have an entire rack of young venison and an entire back leg of young venison. We've got baked stuffed sweet potatoes. We're going to have all sorts of other little goodies. My son-in-law has been making sorbet all day of different fruits. And this is kind of the big party of the year for us. We're just going to start cranking it up.
What?
Tammy, there is a bottle of red wine.
Is there a lot of white
Sam
down
curls up his nose.
Just like
Delta
it?
one.
Is there a lot?
Yeah.
Is plastic like a warm lake? Is it shallow?
Okay, I got 19 and 2/8.
Alright.
No, 19, I'm sorry. Hang on a minute here. I got 19 and 4/8.
Do you?
Yep, 19 and 4.
Okay. We add that to these. And we get a 166 net. Right there.
Wow.
He grossed 169 and a half.
You know, if he had this, I mean, virtually every single tine on this guy was symmetrical except this one. He'd been about 172 and about a half.
Boone Crockett bucket. This
If he'd
one,
been-
with that one.
Yeah. This deer, by the way, was taken by a hunter in the very same place that we horn hunted and scouted today. This is the potential of this area. And just, you know, this is the whole idea behind learning how to scout properly. This buck had been very carefully scouted. You do your homework, you work at it, you get hardcore, and you do it all year long. You'll know what's there. And then when you know what's there, you go find the travel routes, especially looking for funnels and scrape activity. And we find most of our scrapes in the spring.
Yeah, this
You
is the
know,
time to do it.
horn hunting and turkey hunting. And we know those scrapes will be used once we define a big buck in the area. We can go hang stands in August. You know, I mean, they'll work in November.
Right.
So if you never like it,
Right now, it's the 19th of April, and most people would think this is a pretty strange time to be out looking for scrapes. But I think that probably this is one of the best times of all, if you're a serious whitetail hunter, to start doing the job. Now, we happen to be out turkey hunting and spent the morning turkey hunting, and now what I'm doing is scouting whitetails. And we're going to try to do something here that I don't think's ever been done on video. Usually when you do a hunting video, you have to do an awful lot of setting things up and finding your locations. And I want to try something here which I think will prove a point. We've come to this spot. I know the area roughly. I hunted turkeys here last year. And we're going to do this cold turkey, if you'll pardon the pun, and see if we can show you how we would actually scout out a situation and look for scrapes and look for the right area to hunt and look for a place to put your stand, whether it's a ground stand or a tree stand, for the coming fall season. What we got here is a very large river over here that's large enough and deep enough so that when the deer do cross it, it's in very far apart, shallow areas. At this end, we've got a very high bench, an open meadow, and a county road. And so what you have here, you have a natural funnel. You have probably 150-yard wide strip of timber. Here is posted property. That's what the blaze orange mark on the tree means in Montana. That means posted. No cattle in it. Nobody's allowed to hunt in it. It makes an excellent bedding area. On this side, you've got a cattle ranch, and it's been pretty hard grazed. But over to my left, north of here, big irrigated alfalfa fields, major feed source for the deer. It's my assumption that the deer will bed here where they have protection and where they have thick cover, and that they'll cross this fence and that they'll go out towards the alfalfa. It's a natural funnel. Before I hunt scrapes, I hunt funnels. Go find the funnel, look for the scrapes in the funnel. They'll be there. And what we're going to try and do is we're just going to walk along with a camera behind. We're going to scout this for the first time. You're going to see what I see the first time. This hasn't been all pre-planned or plotted. You're going to get a chance to really honestly scout something. And if it doesn't pan out, we'll leave this footage in the video and we'll try it again. I want to try and prove a point here. So what we'll do is we'll walk the fence. We know they have to cross it. Once we find some good crossings, then what we'll do is follow the trails. We can't follow them in there because it's private. We'll follow them towards the alfalfa and we'll look for scrapes. And if we find the right scrape setups, we'll explain what they're about and we'll figure out where we would put an ambush situation. Let's take a look at it. here's a crossing right here. And heck, I haven't gone 20 yards. A lot of deer here on the fence. Good heavy trail. Tracks going both ways. I think most of them seem to be going that way. Now I'm just going to make a guess here, and we won't be able to prove this till hunting season. I'm going to guess that this is a trail that's used by does, fawns, and maybe younger bucks, because it's pretty open here. And I generally would figure, even in a funnel situation where you've got a fair amount of timber and stuff, the bucks will always go in the thickest area of that funnel. Let's take a look and see how many more crossings we find here. This is just a beautiful, beautiful looking setup here. One thing that's really neat is normally we have a prevailing westerly wind. This fence runs east to west. The deer will be coming out in the evening, heading north. You're gonna have a 90-degree crosswind. Now we are hunting in a pretty bad weather system right now, and it's from the east, which is unusual here. And you can see my wind feather. You know, it's showing us that the wind is this way, but even if it comes out of the east, you've got a 90-degree crosswind here. I've already found 2 more crossings here. There's 2 of them right together here, and I notice in this one, the tracks are mostly going to the feeding area. Now we're thinking of feeding area because even in the rut, although the bucks don't feed much, they mostly chase does, the does feed. So if the does go to feed, the bucks chase them there. And I'm going to check out the rest of this fence. I'm expecting, based on experience, to find bigger tracks closer to the brush over by the bench. Then I'll follow the trails and look for scrapes. And from experience again, I know where to look for scrapes. And we'll do this unrehearsed cold turkey. We'll see what we can find. And if you don't find last fall scrapes, it may not be a good place to try and hunt next year during the rut. Now this is the most impressive crossing so far, and I've now seen about 8. There's the bench right there. This is exactly what I expected to find. This is the thickest part of the funnel. This is the best looking trail. Big tracks here. It's kind of interesting. When I'm scouting at different times of the year, I almost always feel like that's the most important time. Scouting backwards on tracks right after the season closes seems really important then. The annual horn roundup is really important because I'm picking up big shed antlers, telling me what's there. But I guess really, push come to shove, if I had to say what is the most important time, and there's a reason for this, I would probably say August. Because in August, and here's the reason, your bucks are hanging together in bachelor groups. So I'm using my thinker here. I'm saying to myself, I want to know what is in an area. And the best time to do that is when the bucks are together, and if they move around visibly, they are together. So all in one fell swoop, I can see what is in the area for bucks and probably have the entire run of the gamut, from the biggest to the smallest. In August, when the bucks are still in velvet, the alfalfa's green, the clover's green, things are beginning to ripen, very often they'll come out before dark. They'll be in a group. I'll have a chance to see what's in the area for bucks. And usually there's only 1 or 2 bachelor groups in an area, and seldom do you see one off by himself. Let's take a look at some good summer scouting techniques that'll show what I'm talking about. This barn is probably about the best place a guy could possibly be to scout these alfalfa fields. The barn isn't being used, but there's always guys out here morning and evening irrigating. The deer are used to people. There's no hunting season going on. Right now the bucks are pretty well grown out. they're still in full velvet, they will shed in about 3 weeks. Nothing's bothering them. They're pretty much sticking around. There's a little 3x3 out there. Just a young guy, probably an 18-month-old buck. Another half hour to an hour, these guys will really start pouring out of the timber to come into the alfalfa. I always try and scout from a distance. I mean, that's the only way to do it. What I'm trying to find out is who's here. Is there a big buck, something I want here? Because when I hunt them in the fall, especially during the rut, they're not going to be here in the alfalfa. But I gotta know what's in an area. And then I scout out the rut area and see what I'm gonna find there. I try to scout from a distance. I don't want to alert the deer. I want to have plenty of chance to watch them. This barn would be perfect if it had a loft in it, because then I'd be up high looking down. I usually will hit a barn like this, hopefully with a hayloft, or I'll go into a haystack. What's really neat here too is that I can walk around in here all evening. They can't see into the dark of the barn, so I can go from one door to the other just checking it out. 2 tools you really gotta have. A really good pair of quality binoculars. I'd recommend at least 8 power. And if you want to get right down to the nitty-gritty and really examine a buck, you want a good quality spotting scope. I've had just tremendous luck with these Swarovskis. They give me everything I need. They're good light gatherers. And I can pull a buck in with a zoom lens and really examine him. But I can also, I can just bounce around in this barn and really keep an eye on what's happening. At the end of the evening, it doesn't matter if I spook anything, because I'm not going to be hunting here for a month or so. There's a real nice 4x4. Hard to tell in the velvet, but he looks like about 125 incher. Oh, there's another one. He's even bigger. There's a dandy back in the timber over there in the sun, too. That's 5 bucks I've seen. Oh, they're in the sunlight. I love it. Here they come. Oh, man, is that beautiful. There's an awful lot of pretty animals in this world, but the white-tailed buck is the most gorgeous of all. Look at that boy running into the alfalfa. First one is a 4x5. Big one is a 4x4, it looks like. And that little guppy in the back, why, he's just there. They're going to come right towards the barn. Oh, that's pretty. Boy, now there's a perfect funnel situation. That tree is falling down on the fence. If the rancher hasn't fixed that by fall, all you'd have to do is get a tree stand somewhere close to the line on that. Look at that. Go right through where the fence is knocked down. I love it. Whoa, what a spot for an ambush, ground blind, or tree stand. This is what scouting does for you. You not only see what's in the area, but you see what they do, where they go, where they're coming from, their bedding areas. It just really sets you up. You need to scout 365 days of the year. If you can't do it in the field, you do it in your head when you're sitting around daydreaming. Better yet, you do it at work. Scouting is the one key ingredient to putting it together on a big whitetail. You can do everything else right, yet if you don't know where they are, forget it. You're wasting your time unless you're just blind lucky. Lots of little calves. There's a spike bull. Another spike bull, another spike bull. One of the problems with scouting whitetails like this in the morning is the darn elk keep getting in the way and making you stop. I like to scout out of a vehicle like this, especially in the morning, because the game is pretty much on its way back into the timber, and I just drive ranch roads and logging roads to see what's around. It doesn't spook them. They'll move out, but they're used to vehicles, and I can cover a huge amount of ground. And basically what I'm really trying to do is just locate big bucks. It's pretty good when you're driving by the rancher's house and he's got deer right in the yard. Look at that little booger, isn't that cute? Here's a real good trail. Comes down across the bedding, from the bedding area down across this little logging road down towards where the alfalfa fields are. Be a super good evening spot for a tree stand ambush. The wind would be wrong for a morning spot. I see both elk and deer tracks in it. It's the kind of thing I look for when I'm scouting, especially where I'm riding around. I'm covering ground, I'm looking for sign, looking for animals, looking for logical or likely places for movement. We've now taken you from scouting right after the hunting season, through the winter, our spring horn roundup, spring turkey hunting, into summer scouting, and in theory, right about the 1st of September, your scouting should be pretty much wrapped up. You should know what's in the area. You should have a real good idea where they're moving. You should have some pretty good idea of when they're there. Hopefully, if you've done your thinking correctly, you know why. You've probably got some pretty tight areas picked out for tree stand installation, probably have hung tree stands, you should have. I don't like to scout much in the fall because it's getting too close to that time when I hunt the deer, and I don't want to take a chance at blowing a deer out of his area, having to change his pattern. When I do fall scout, I do so very cautiously. I stalk, or I scout with binoculars from as long a distance as possible. Try not to let the deer know you're there. When you have to go into an area, you might try matching normal human incursion by non-hunters. On a farm, find out how the farmer goes into the area. Try using that method so the deer won't be alarmed. What I'd like to do is I'd like to show you something that happened to me during the filming of this scouting video that involved the most dramatic thinking and finally using my brain of anything that's happened to me in the last 20 years of deer hunting. You're going to see the actual on the ground footage on film, but I'd like to show you on the board what happened to me and what it did for my scouting and my tree stand placement. Very, very critical thing in bow hunting is wind. And one thing that affects wind a lot that most people don't realize is terrain. You can have, for example, a steady, always out of the west wind. You go through various terrain features and that wind will do a lot of different things. This past fall, my hunting partner Tom Storm and I were scouting an area where I knew there were bucks. We were after a particular buck in the area. We knew where the scrapes would be. They've always been there for 20 years. We've hunted this area. We've never been able to place a tree stand there because of bad wind conditions. A little quirk of fate caused me to walk out of the gully where the scrapes were, up onto a ridge adjacent to it, and notice my wind feather doing something very different and unusual. Here's what happened. Standing on the ground looking to the west, and I'll just say the west is up here, coming this way, there's just a little tiny gully that starts. And it goes off towards the west like that. As you go further west, the gully gets deeper and deeper. When you get about to the middle of the gully, there's a big hill here. The gully comes down. It's only about 40 yards across, and it goes up about 20 feet, 25 feet to a ridge here. And the bucks walk the gully. They're out of sight of anyone here, pretty much out of sight of any predator here. They have a scrape line. If you look down on this terrain feature, here's what it would look like. You've got your big hill. The gully starts here. And it runs about 400 yards. And there's a slight ridge here that widens out down here. The scrapes are all down the center of the gully. The gully's got pine trees and Douglas fir trees and quake and aspen. And there's a regular scrape line, and the wind normally comes out of the west. When it does, the bucks walk this way. When there's no wind, then thermals will blow from here down, and the deer always travel it this way. There's no way that you can go anywhere close to these scrapes and set up a tree stand. 18 years of trying taught me that. I'm also dumber than a box of rocks. I never thought about the unique terrain situation here, and by mistake, this past fall, when Tom and I were scouting, Tom walked down to take a look at the scrapes carefully so he didn't leave scent. And my attitude was, why waste my time? And I walked along up here. And until I got to this point, right where this little dog leg or bend in this gully is, my wind feather, the wind was coming out of the west, my wind feather was blowing right back at me. When I hit here, and there was a slight little break in the ridge, just a little low spot, all of a sudden, my wind feather went just like that. 90 degrees. I looked at it, light bulbs came on. I started to think. First time in a long time. I walked down into the gully where Tom was. There was a scrape right in here, a big one. My wind feather was blowing straight up the gully. I walked back up on the hill. My wind feather was blowing this way. I am really a slow learner. I had to do this again. Went back down, sure enough, my wind feather was going this way. And I thought about something. I went back up on the hill, and I looked at a good tree, lots of branches, lots of cover near the scrape, and I kind of eyeballed what I thought was level. I went to my pickup truck. I got tree steps and a tree stand. I went up about the height I thought I should be, which turned out to be about 23 feet, which is a little higher than I normally go. I hung the stand, I hauled my bow up, I looked at my wind feather, and it was blowing exactly that direction. What was happening is the wind was hitting this hill. This is my guess, since I'm not a weatherologist or whatever you call them. And it was bouncing off, and it was blowing here. Down at the base of the tree, the wind was still going this way. I've kind of messed up the drawing here, but the point is real simple. We found a terrain feature that caused the change in the wind, and it's only in a little gap, just a small area right where this bend is. And we were able to set up there and had some incredible deer movement. You'll see bucks that we passed up on film. The buck that we were after actually came in and started on this scrape line. One of the problems that you have when you're filming is you have to have a cameraman with you, and mine made a noise. He's still a real nice guy, but he made a noise, and the buck did the boogaloo. I was able to take a buck the last afternoon of the season from this stand. He came in with the wind in his face and never had the suspicion that anything was wrong. The idea behind showing you this is to get you to start to think. And when you're out there scouting, realize that unless you're in absolutely flat ground, there are going to be vagaries in the wind caused by terrain. This is something you need to know about. We found 3 or 4 other setups where hillsides and gullies have given us the chance to put up stands where we never thought it was possible in the past. This is the greatest computer in the world. Use it. Mine may not be as good as yours, but use it. And take notes. Use your hunting log. Think about this stuff. Let's show you some of the actual footage taken here to demonstrate what we're talking about. Hunting season's been over for a week. I'm doing two things. I'm scouting for next year, but I'm recreating something that actually happened to me in this spot about a month ago, just before the snow came. This is a gully here, and it runs from east, where it starts, and deepens as it runs to the west. If the wind is out of the west, which is the way it's supposed to be, it always blows up the gully. In the mornings, if there is no prevailing west wind, you'll get a downdraft. And the bucks especially use this. It's a very natural funnel because a gully will keep them out of the eye of the predators. Does use it too, but the bucks will travel it with the wind in their noses. There's a dog leg or a bend in the gully right here and a big high hill. If I were to walk down in the gully, my wind feather would be blowing that way or that way. Right at the bend, the wind feather is blowing perfectly crossways, crosswind. And I did an experiment. I went down and hung a tree stand, and I tried to get up as high as the lip of this bench. And sure enough, I had a perfect crosswind. The last night of the hunting season, I killed a buck out of this tree stand. Not the buck I'd been scouting, but when you got a half an hour of the season left and a mature buck comes in, you just don't play choosy. But this is one of those things that I want to try and illustrate when I talk about scouting. There's an aspect of scouting that few people realize. When you go out and you're looking for deer, you're scouting, you're observing deer. And for definitional purposes, when I do seminars, I use this. You're either going to watch the deer or you're going to see the deer. I'm not playing word games. People who watch deer don't ever store what they observed up here. If you see something, this is by my definition, it goes in here. I hunted this for 18 years and never really hunted it because I knew I couldn't get a buck to come in to a tree stand because of the wind. And all of a sudden, instead of watching this situation, one day I happened to be scouting up here on the edge instead of down in there where all the scrapes are, and I realized that my wind feather wasn't doing what it should do. Go down, set up a tree stand, find out you got a perfect situation. I saw something instead of watching it. I put it in the hair-covered computer and used it to take a deer. You have to think. The other thing that you've got to do is you've got to scout all the time. Here's where he whirled when I hit him. Here's the first blood right here. I saw blood immediately. Well, we got a heck of a blood trail here. Oh yeah, here we go, everywhere. There's good blood here all the way. I could see he was center punch, but I really like to see a blood trail like this. You know darn well he's piled up somewhere right up there. Go see how big that rack is. Good shot. His teeth are just flat. That's an old buck. That's an old timer. Probably had a much bigger rack before, but he's been fighting. Not bad. Not bad for the last half hour of the last day of the season. Made a good hit exactly where I aimed. Took my time. And there's a lot of venison there. We've taken you through a full year of scouting. We think we've shown you some really good tips and techniques that you can use. If I had to sum everything up into one little ball and say which was the most important in scouting, I'd say use your mind. Think. Understand why. Never stop trying to learn and notice things. If you do that, if you combine some of these techniques, if you scout year-round, I think I can guarantee that you're going to take bigger and better whitetails every year, because it's only a learning process, and once someone starts you on that trail, you're on your way. We hope you enjoyed it. Good hunting.